So next up is Larry Weathers. He's going to talk to us about science. And I just want to tell you what we're doing, which is that we are, this spring, but also in the fall, trying to get sort of information from each of the departments to sort of get a overview sense of where we've been, where we're going, what our hopes are. And so we've started with history, I think was our first.
Yes.
And we will not be finishing up this spring, but we hope to finish in the fall.
We get to keep these, Larry?
2016. It's a
Oh, these are new. Cool.
Science always has stuff. You know, it's got lab equipment and materials, and I wanted to share some of it with you.
So I just want to say we are a couple minutes ahead, which is great because we have extra time.
Sorry, what?
We're a couple minutes ahead of our schedule, which is
should
great.
I
So we have
wait?
extra time. No. But just a worry. I know that it usually takes about 2 minutes per slide, so I know that we'll probably have to rush through some of the slides, but that they are available for the public to look at as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, well, thank you for allowing me to share with you some of the struggles and accomplishments we're going through in our science department. Sorry, is this a click?
Yeah, you have to.
Oh, it's over. These are the mission statements of the science department. Now, it ends up that the new science standards just came out last month, the formal printing of them. And they almost totally mirror these. And I'm sort of proud to say that we had these before the science standards came out. So we're interested in lifelong learning about being literate science citizens. And so that's where we're really trying to head. So my colleague from the math department has left, so that's why I inserted this slide here. I wanted you to see, although it's not entirely obvious, where is science? It's at the core. If you look at the upper left picture, and you can barely see the word science on the left, it's just a little closer to the heavens than math. The math is down there a little further down on the right. And
When we demolish this building and rebuild it, we can make consideration.
okay, well,
Don't take it for granted.
I'm describing the current state of affairs. And then in the vertical view, science is right there in the center. It's connected to every one of those disciplines. It uses math. Science goes on in all the countries of the globe. It uses language, and the history of it is very rich. And so I of course, use these pictures tongue-in-cheek. But so the question is, if we're at the core, which I was positing before, why weren't we at the table? And as we have gone through a progression of regulatory documents from NCLB to ESSA to the new science, technology, and engineering frameworks, which were just adopted, we have started to move from that back burner to the front burner. We're not all the way there yet, but we've started. Our scores count, not to focus totally on test taking. We really want the lifelong learning, but our scores count now. They're part of what matters in terms of our annual reports and how the state views us. So we have our new standards that just came out, and what do they look like? Here's an example. The standards are too complicated to look at in a short presentation, but they're composed of two major sections, one called Disciplinary Core Ideas, which are the areas of each topical discipline of life science, physical science, and earth science. And here's an example from grade 3 physical science. Provide evidence to explain the effect of multiple forces, including friction, etc. And these are all worded as as what should the student be able to do at the end of a unit that's addressing the standards, their performance standards. And so this is a very important part of the new science standards, as well as the practices that were added. Long ago, the inquiry strands were in our early standards back in the early 1990s, and then they slowly got pulled out, and more, because of the difficulty of testing them. And so they're back in, and they are claiming that they're going to test them, and we'll see how that all works. But I've seen some very creative questions being developed, and so if you look at these science and engineering practices, which really are the inquiry skills that kids, that we're hoping that kids experience, these are the ways scientists work. And I think if you pick through those, you can see that they really totally overlap the ELA and the math practices. The Common Core is in there 2/3 of the way, and the math standards are and practices are in there. They're really overlapping. And so the writers of the new science standards were well aware of that. And they that is one of the advantages in the sense of going last in terms of the development of the ELA and math Common Core standards, and then the next generation science standards came along. But they had the wisdom to know how to incorporate that and overlap with the Common Core. Massachusetts, of course, always has its own way of doing some educational things, and it didn't strictly adopt the NGSS. It pushed a few parts aside, but it made a few parts stronger, which included the engineering practices. So it's an expectation that engineering is embedded in all of the science courses. We're not there yet, but we're looking for the ways to do that, so that every course will have opportunities for kids to look at problems and try to solve those problems and make iterative changes to reach a solution in an engineering kind of process. So embedded within that new framework is this little table on the left. It's called the assumed minutes per day to reach the standards that are expected and that will be tested in about it's still being debated when it'll be tested, but it'll be probably about 2 years, maybe 3. So you can see in K through 2, they're assuming that we're spending 2 hours per week, 3 through 5, 3 hours per week, 6 through 8, 4.5, and in high school, 5.5. And you can see in the middle column there that we are very shy of that. And this is our anticipated time for next year. In prior years, before the standards were developed and before we were on the table in terms of the regulatory things, it was even less than this. And so that's one of our challenges, is how do we work with these time deficits? And again, I just cut and pasted that table right out of the standards. So one of the things we're doing is we have adopted a new program called FOSS. The program itself is not new, but the iteration called the Next Gen edition is new. They were so on top of it, they came out right after the Next Gen was adopted, and it's really the best program on the market. These are the topical areas in columns of physical science, earth and space science, and life science through the 5 years of elementary school. We have been in our rollout. This current year, we have introduced these kits to grades 1, 2, and 3. And in the coming fall, we will be introducing them to grades 4 and 5. The program is research-based. It was developed at the Lawrence Hall of Science and the University of California, Berkeley. It is centered on those two statements there. Science is inherently interesting to kids, and they love to play around and muck around in boats. And and to explore things. So there's a quote from one of our more experienced elementary school teachers. We're loving the new science kits, very teacher and kid friendly. She's a veteran teacher, and the new teachers are still having trouble with it, as they would with any new curriculum. So we're finding where we have gaps, we're finding where we need support, and we're trying to plug those holes. But by and large, it's a really, really rich curriculum. So an example, the motion and matter unit from grade 3. The students explore, it's called motion and matter, and they do it through a variety of experiments. They first of all build tops, spin them. You can imagine kids in 3rd grade loving this. And then they create new interactions. They create an axle with a wheel on each side, but the wheels are not the same size. So it does some strange things. And then they start exploring that, and eventually have to build cars that are part of an engineering design challenge, where the cars have to do certain tricks. They have to turn left and right and end up under ramps and things like that. So it's hard to notice where science and engineering learning ends and where play begins. And that's the great thing about this, is that the kids really, really love doing it. Some strong points about the FOSS system is that it's got really high quality supports. It is very language based, and I've shown you that I just passed around these examples of folios and student resources. The hardcover book is a reader. And so one of the strategies that we're talking about in terms of how do we get that time to deal with the science that we need, these informational reading passages are directly part of the science experiments they're doing. And so what we're trying to do is see if there are ways that we can use these as part of an overlap with our ELA informational reading time, and thereby gain some time back. It's really, as I said, the Common Core overlap is striking. It has a very strong notebooking component. One of the other folios I passed out is all about the philosophy and the strategies of notebook taking that get kids to read and write and articulate. And it has built-in ELL strategies. It's really a 21st century program. Very rich formative assessment and technology resources for the teachers. And teacher prep videos. A teacher can go and look at a 5-minute video of what the lesson is that they have to do a day or two from now, and see what it looks like. And we try to give them the professional development ahead of time, but for them to go back and be able to review that at home on their computer or wherever is a real great thing. It uses a lot of language for inquiry. They're consistently involved in writing, in their notebooking, and all the other things that it says here. They are asked to engage in argumentation based on evidence, and the research really shows that when kids learn either from just pure reading or even just from pure experimenting, the learning is nowhere near as deep as when they're asked to reflect on it, write about it, and read about it. It's really an integrated approach. And you can imagine that if a student were to read and write about something, what better than something that's right in front of them, or that they saw that day or the day before, a bunch of growing plants, watching why some die and some don't, and articulating that. It's concrete and it's right there, so it really aids in the writing. So with the pressure from the congested curriculum and the lack of enough time for science notebooking is a way of helping with that. I think you probably notice where that notebook page on the upper left came from. That's a page out of Leonardo da Vinci's book, his lab notebook. Okay, and so our kids are starting to do this. You can see a progression there of 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade, even though this 4th grade example is not from our students because they haven't had this yet. but kids start to articulate in the right, bottom right, from a fourth grade student. Although you can't read it from here, the student was observing plants growing. The teacher posted a sticky and said, "Where's your evidence?" And the kid answers back, "My evidence is," and gives a hypothesis. It may or may not be correct, but it's the start of an argumentation from evidence. And so we hope that notebooking is going to be a very strong part of this program. And we get to the Audison Middle School. Now, this cartoon was obviously meant for a different kind of sandwiching, but I think the middle school was sandwiched for a while because when the Common Core came out, the NGSS got delayed. We were waiting for the NGS, the next generation science standards, to be developed because we knew that the Massachusetts science standards wouldn't get developed until the NGSS came out. And at the same time, so we were reluctant to make whole big purchases for grade levels of science materials, not knowing what those standards, how they were changing. And at the same time, we didn't want to get old books. You know, we go from the good to the bad and the ugly. You know, this is pre-2000. and that's what we're using, in a sense, right now. So we wanted to go to digital resources. It's definitely the way to go. But then we also had to be cognizant of when the digital access was going to be there. And you know, it came up through the elementary school and is now finally there. So we're ready to roll. We have some money in the budget for next year to explore those digital resources and start recommending, so we're moving in that direction. This is our current curriculum, and this is already partly revised to the new standards. We've moved a few things around already. Astronomy used to be in the 8th grade, now it's in the 6th grade, and we're just kind of finding what we need to move into to align ourselves with the new standards. So we have old texts, but creative teachers who have been developing their own materials along the way, and we have that budget to help that process along. They keep it lab-oriented, and we've had a great writing program, a CER program, Claims, Evidence, Reasoning, and that's through 6th through 8th. The students are asked to really defend what they do in their lab experiments and collecting data, explain it, and argue and produce arguments that will defend it. So at the middle school, we also have some state and nationally acclaimed technology teachers from the Mass Tech and NSTA and the International Technology Educators Association. We've had some awards acclaiming our program and our teachers as top-notch. And technology is in the new standards, it is an equal part to all the sciences. Mm-hmm. And so we're proud to sponsor that and to have a robust program there. And it has engaging and pertinent after-school activities. This year we had to double the amount of staff that would manage the robotics people because there were so many kids that wanted to be part of it. We have had a growing science fair effort at the middle school. Moving quickly on to the high school, we have solid core courses, and we try to maintain a heavy lab emphasis, although size and scheduling has started to become a limitation. And we, at the same time, are increasing our use of digital access, and we thank the AEF, some AEF members who were instrumental in bringing us new digital access devices, walked through our school today, and I think they enjoyed what they saw. We thank the Capital Committee for all their contributions to that, and you, the Arlington Public Schools, and the people who make those decisions. We're moving along. We're on a moving train now, and we're gonna try to keep it going that way. So we have, our core courses: introductory physics, biology, chemistry, and physics, and our electives we're proud of these capstone courses: astronomy, archaeology, oceanography, anatomy and physiology, engineering, environmental science. There's a lot there to interest kids, and they show that to us. I'll show you the statistics in a minute. Our AP is growing, so you can see the years here, and next year we're anticipating 8 sections, and our enrollment is going from 136 to 183. Part of that is our Enviro AP, which was recently enough added, and we are still struggling with that a little bit, which I think you'll see in the next slide. We brought in a teacher had never taught that before. It was a new curriculum, so we had some alignment to do. So our performance in the AP is really quite strong. In the bio and chem and physics, these are scores 3, 4, and 5. In the AP, as I said, we needed some alignment and calibration. I think we're there. I think this last year we were there, but we will see in July when the new scores come out. So this is sort of like the issue that Matt Coleman brought up. We have a science requirement of 3 courses, but I just took a poll through our data specialists of the average number of science courses taken by senior over their 4 years here, and it's 4.28. So not only did most students surpass the requirement of 3 and take 4, but about 28% took a 5th course. So that brings up the same question that you asked, Bill. Are we pushing the kids too much? Well, again, I think we counsel the kids carefully to not look at this as an isolated choice. In fact, just today I had a student say, "Can I, as a sophomore, can I take AP environmental and chemistry?" And I said, "I don't think so. I think an AP environmental is a capstone course. So first of all, you'd be going into it without biology and chemistry, and you wouldn't get as much out of it." So we do counsel our kids when to and when not to take these courses, and of course that social emotional piece is very strong there, because if students want to take 3 honors and 3 APs, of course they're going to be stressed out, and only some kids can do that. So our MCAS is strong and growing. These are just 2 snippets. All students on the top left, in going from 14 to 15, the colors don't show it here, but on the left is advanced. Second left is proficient. Third left is needs improvement, and the right side is failure. And so we've increased, going from 14 to 15, our proficiency, our advanced, quite significantly, and we've decreased our needs improvement a bit. We still have a lot of work to do. We're interested in those kids that are in that gap. And even though we make some, you can see that our proficient group went up, we still have more people in those later bars there than we want, and we're looking at strategies to solve that. So we have many adjunct activities at the high school: robotics, Olympiad, EnviroGuard, and Makerspace internships, and seminars. We have a lot of speakers come in, all the way from astronauts to many different scientists and science writers. And the future directions. So we really see increasing our digital access. We're moving into a BYOD. There'll be hurdles and hiccups along the way, and we'll figure out what those are, and we'll work our way through them. And as that occurs, we're looking at more digital resources and increased lab space. We really need that. Now, the new building project should solve that over time. And it's hard to just make space appear, and we realize that. So that's why we're trying to juggle things. And we try to keep those lab populations within safe limits. This is a graph out of a report from the state of Texas, which covered data from about 1,000 schools, of class size at the bottom and the rate of accidents on the upper left. Mm-hmm. And as you get past 20 to 24 in labs, you can see that rate starts to go up exponentially. We want to try to watch that. Mm-hmm. So that's why we try to be careful about our lab populations, our sizes. And of course, you know, we're here for the globe, and we want our kids to go out of Arlington High prepared and understanding the issues and having some tools to feel empowered about dealing with those issues rather than feeling doom and gloom. So you saw again that in the assumption of time for the standards, we probably need to have more time somewhere. We're trying to figure out how to do that. And that's all. So questions? Yes.
Mr. Thielman.
So I just want to ask 3 questions. First of all, years ago, I recall a struggle to find science teachers. There was turnover in the science positions, and could you just kind of give us an update on how we're doing?
On turnover?
Yeah, and how we're doing on retaining teachers and
Well,
vacancies?
it's a struggle. When we have an opening because somebody leaves in physics or chemistry, and sometimes physics and chemistry, we have some choices to make that involve, do we need a physics teacher and a chemistry teacher, and do we need to hire 2, or do we need to hire who will fit that one bill, and maybe that person's a little more expensive, and we have to do that. These are critical areas, and they're not as easy to come by. I think statistically in the last round of advanced science course hiring, I probably had 5 or 6 appropriate candidates. You know, and that's not a lot.
Yeah.
You know, considering after you interview them, there
Oh,
some
okay.
drop by the way.
Yeah.
So how are we doing that? We try to attract them. We listen to their needs. They're here for the most part. I could say that the science teachers are here because they're passionate about teaching science. They're not here because they have their an extra month during the summer. They're not here because they have because they're making more money than they would make in industry. They're not here for a variety of reasons. They're here because they love to teach kids science. And so we have to listen to their needs so that they can do that well, and when they succeed, our kids will succeed. So I think our turnover has been pretty slow lately.
Good.
In fact, we've been expanding, trying to take care of some of that lab size issue, you know, and so we've been growing, and the people that are here for the most part are staying.
Good.
So
And I should have prefaced my questions by saying this is a great presentation. So
it's a what?
This was a great presentation.
Oh, thank you.
And I should have begun that way. The next question I had is, could you talk a little bit about the MCAS scores for the high needs students are not where we want them to be? I guess.
I'm sorry.
The
fan
MCAS
sometimes is
Yep.
distracting.
Yeah, I'll talk louder. The MCAS scores for the high needs students are not as loud, not as high as we'd like them to be.
That's right.
So I just would like someone, maybe either you or Dr. Bodie or Dr. Chesson, to talk about what's the strategy to help those high needs students.
What we're doing, part of what we're doing is in our using the Edwin Analytics, the analysis branch of all the data that the state collects. We can disaggregate that data, and so we disaggregate it by high needs and all students, and so we look at the data, and what we do is we analyze strands and questions. So we can look at themes and saying, let's see, our high needs students are having trouble with these kinds of questions. Let's see what we can do to bolster that part of our teaching curriculum, because we know we have the data. We do our DDMs and our common assessments, and we look at that data and we disaggregate it. So we're trying to get some insights into what areas they need more support in. That's one thing. We're also in our AP courses, AP produces a report every year called AP, I forget the term, AP Access, and they help us to analyze kids that have potential to go further in science, of all kids. And so we specifically, we've had a grant that just ended this last year to try to increase high needs kids' participation in AP courses. And we tried to bring those in by analyzing that data from the College Board. Sensitivity training and awareness, we're doing that. We're working with the rest of the administration to try to say what do these kids need, and why are there more difficulties, and how do we bridge those gaps? So we're trying to look at that and make people aware of it. What are the issues? Make teachers aware of them, so that they can offer more supports. I think those are probably the general things.
Some of the challenges also that students have is the reading of the material on the tests.
Yeah.
And so we're really working as a curriculum team to identify those transferable skills so that the methods that, claims, evidence, that process, we're looking at, well, what do we call that in other subject areas? How do we help kids with close reading? How do we help them with informational reading? And use the same techniques across all subject areas in order to bolster those skills.
Yeah, we're really
skills for kids.
emphasizing that. In fact, a comment from a teacher who is an AP teacher here, and the AP tests were just a week or so ago, and so I said, so how do the kids do? How do you think? How do they comment that they did? And the kids' comments are, oh, there's so much writing on that test. It's not A, B, C, D.
Yeah.
And the writing isn't, describe this experiment. It's student A says this and student B says this. Who's right and why? And so it's claims, evidence, reasoning, and we're preparing the kids for that. And that's the way the new MCAS 2 will probably come out, and that's one of the ways they're going to get at inquiry, is to have kids explain what they have experienced through inquiry by dialogue. So I'm good.
Right. Dr. Allison Ampe.
I wanted to follow up on Mr. Thielman's question about the MCAS. Can you pull up the graph?
I can, absolutely.
So I agree that we certainly have room to improve, but I just wanted to point out that there was a significant improvement
Yes,
from
yes.
2014 to
I tried
2015.
to mention that
I mean, that's-
the proficient went up significantly enough,
Yeah.
and the advanced didn't go down,
Yeah,
and we pulled from that needs improvement.
yeah, that's,
Yeah,
I
we're
thought
making
that was
progress, but
pretty
we've got work to do.
impressive.
I'd like that bottom right graph to be the top left graph at some point.
yes. No, I agree, but I just thought
Thank
that
you for
even,
pointing
you
that
know,
out.
that for 1 year is really impressive. And then if you can go back to your class size graph, the second to last slide,
The what, which graph?
second to last slide.
Oh,
Yeah. I'm wondering what's the average class size in Arlington for science classes, looking at,
well, that's, to answer that, I'd have to have a magic wand, because in some sense, it's a strategy game. And so when we start the scheduling process, we know that students will change a bit. Some students, and rightfully so, want to challenge themselves, part of what you were talking about, Bill, sometimes over-challenge themselves and decide, I'll be better off if I'm in a different section, and those numbers change throughout the year. And so we start out with a really strong imbalance in our higher level courses, very, very large class sizes, 25, 26, 27, 28 in a lab. And then we expect that over the course of the year, as kids make different choices, that those will level out to the 24 range, and that the other classes would start out very small. It may, if you looked at it in the beginning, you might say, how come we're offering classes that small? But it's because they're going to fill up.
okay.
And so we adjust that, and ideally, I would love to have our lab classes at 20 or so, 22. Sometimes we don't make it because when we have 9 sections of an honors level class, the scheduling doesn't always go so that they're averaged out. Sometimes one class will be 28 and then another one will be 17. So we do our best to try to keep them to the mid-20s, but it doesn't always work.
Okay, thank you. And then the last question is kind of for either you or the administration, which is, I was glad that you brought up about sort of dual counting time when you can do both ELA and science at the same time.
When what?
When you can do both ELA and science at the same time. And I'm just wondering, how do we count that time? I mean, do we actually double count it when we're trying to figure out how much time they're spending?
We're working through that a bit. We're not there yet. And so those are all good questions. You know, in a sense, they're integrated time.
Yeah,
You know, they're both.
yeah, no,
Larry-
it
Larry's
makes
talking
sense.
about
It's-
the elementary level.
Oh,
just
I'm
so
sorry,
that-
talking about the
Yeah,
elementary.
Yeah, just so we're
Yes.
clear, we're talking about when
Yes,
we
that was only the
Right.
elementary.
When we do that at the elementary level, and they'll be
Right.
planning this summer in both social studies and science as they're doing their professional development. This informational topic could be, I was at a professional development experience this week on Tuesday. Grade 5 does something called clean water. If that match, that's their reading unit. That's not their science unit. However, it could tie into their science unit, or we might say, well, that's not 5th grade science, that might be 4th grade science, and so then we move it down to 4th grade. So there's gonna be a lot of work done on that integration this summer.
But when we count things, do we actually count, counts the minutes for both science and for ELA? Or, I mean, I'm not trying to suggest
We haven't
we're doing-
gotten that far yet.
We haven't gotten that far, right.
It makes
We don't
sense.
know.
I'm
It's
just
a
curious.
new issue, and I think other people around the state are experiencing the same thing, because there's just so much to do. There's so much on the plates of these teachers that we have to figure out smarter ways to let them do really good things and not be frustrated about it and not give up on some of it.
Mr. Hayner.
Thank you for this and all the work that you do.
Oh, thank
The
you.
elementary teacher in me goes, your sixth slide, the grade 3 physical science, the pieces you brought. I can remember having students, science lends itself to a lot of projects, hands-on, and assessing some of my students, I figured I had a future Enrique Fermi or great scientists coming, but when they had to take a written test and to show these skills made by the state and stuff like this, and it becomes very abstract for them and very, very difficult.
Right.
I'm hoping through you and other teachers, when they come up with the tests on these standards, there's some way of getting a kinesthetic or hands-on way for these children to evaluate, because in the classroom at the elementary level and even at the high school level in chemistry and stuff, they learn these things. Yes, they're writing down responses and stuff, but asking the detailed questions to show evidence and stuff, often the child can do it by showing you.
Right.
And having the tools that they were using initially. Yes, they transferred it to their notebook and writing and stuff, but it's more real in the real world. So I guess what I'm asking you,
I appreciate that, and I assure you, too, that we are doing that in our own classes.
Right.
The struggle comes with the standardized state testing.
Exactly.
In our own classes, it would be very easy for an elementary teacher to come up and say, hey, you know, tell me about these 5 plants here. How come one's wilted? And in a sense, that's both a performance assessment and maybe a summative assessment as well. And so when we're doing that in our classes.
again, my concern is, and hopefully you as a director will have some influence on the state to let them know that.
Oh, well, we're trying.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Awesome.
Okay?
Okay, thank you. Great.
If you would like,
Oh, you
you know,
should have
these
these
are
back.
very rich resources. You know, if you want to look at them, take them home, just bring them back, and, you know, we're not going to use them anymore this year, so you can just, you know, leave
These
them
ones are
somewhere
so
in the.
new, I'm afraid to look at.
I'm afraid to take a look.
Yeah,
They're so
it could be your bedside reading for the next week, you know? Okay,
That's
thank you,
what's up,
thank you
that's
very
on.
much.
Look here and I learned something.
Yeah, great, great.
Great,
Well,
thank
that's
you
what
very
one of our
much.
kids do too. Thank you again.
Thanks, Larry.